Your presence here adds such a distinguished air to the occasion.
We were just admiring the exquisite detailing on your jacket. Quite impressive.
Your presence here is such a delight, Adrian. We've been so eager to meet you. And you. Tell me, what truly brings you here?
Subscribe for more videos. Turn on notifications.
The richest man in the city sat alone at a dining table, built for 12, staring at a birthday cake with only one candle lit. Not because he was turning 1 year older, but because, at 29 years old, Adrian Vale had finally realized something terrifying. He could buy attention. He could buy loyalty. He could even buy applause, but he had no idea if anyone around him actually cared about him. And by the next morning, Adrian was willing to risk his pride, his image, and everything people thought they knew about him, just to find one honest heart. Adrian Vale was the kind of man magazines loved to write about. Young, brilliant, self-made, at least in the public imagination. The face behind one of the fastest-growing architecture and hospitality companies in the country. He owned hotels, luxury residences, and a long list of awards he never bothered to read twice. People called him disciplined, visionary, untouchable. But if someone had walked through the silent halls of his mansion after midnight, they would have found a very different man. A man reheating tea in a kitchen too large for one person. A man scrolling through congratulatory messages that all sounded exactly the same. A man staring at a dozen smiling photos from charity events, board meetings, and galas, trying to remember the last time someone had asked him a question without expecting a favor on the other side of it. His parents had passed away when he was in college. His relatives appeared only when headlines about acquisitions appeared. His so-called friends always had business plans, introductions, or small opportunities they wanted to discuss over dinner. Even dating had become exhausting. The women he met were polished, charming, and often very kind on the surface. But too often, their interests seemed to grow in direct proportion to the size of his home, the brand of his watch, or the rumors about his next investment. Adrian didn't want admiration. He wanted peace. He wanted honesty. He wanted someone to look at him and see a human being before they saw a bank account. On the night of his 29th birthday, that loneliness finally turned into a plan. The next morning, Adrian sat across from the only person in his company who had known him long enough to speak freely. His legal advisor and mentor, Martin Reeves, a calm 63-year-old man with silver hair and the patience of a school principal. Martin folded his hands. "Let me get this straight. You want to disappear from your own image, move into the East Wing under an assumed setup, use a wheelchair in private staff spaces, and observe how people treat you when they think you can't offer them anything." Adrian nodded, not forever, just long enough to learn what's real. Martin looked at him for a long moment. "This isn't about business. No, it's about trust." Adrian gave a tired smile. "It's about whether I'm living in a beautiful building full of strangers." Martin exhaled slowly. "This is an unusual idea. I know, it's risky, I know. It may show you things you don't want to see." Adrian leaned back. "That's exactly why I need to do it." Martin studied him, then nodded once. "Then if you're going to do this, do it with dignity. No mocking. No games meant to humiliate anyone. If you test people, you must also be prepared to face your own flaws." Adrian's expression softened. "Fair." Martin slid a folder across the table. "Your staff already knows the East Wing is under quiet renovation and being used for private health recovery. Only a small circle will know the full truth. You'll be introduced to newer service staff as Mr. Aiden Cross, a private investor recovering from a long medical condition and staying here discreetly. Adrian opened the folder, then paused. You really prepared all this? Martin raised a brow. You've been talking about trust for 3 years. I just suspected one day you'd finally do something dramatic. For the first time in weeks, Adrian laughed. And that was how Adrian Vale, billionaire hotel magnate, disappeared behind the name Aiden Cross. The east wing of the mansion had once belonged to Adrian's mother. It was the warmest part of the house, filled with natural light, soft colors, bookshelves, and a quiet garden view. Unlike the grand entertaining spaces in the main wing, the east side felt lived in. Human, it was the only part of the mansion that ever felt like home. That was where Adrian settled into his new role. He used a wheelchair in visible staff areas and private household settings, presenting himself as a wealthy but physically limited, long-term guest who preferred privacy. He dressed simply. No expensive watches, no public meetings, no dramatic entrances. The mansion staff had been told to offer routine care and respect, nothing more. At first, Adrian believed the disguise would mainly expose opportunists in his social circle. He was wrong. It exposed loneliness in its purest form. Some people became overly polite the moment they thought he might be a source of hidden wealth. A lifestyle influencer who had recently been introduced through a charity board accidentally stopped by twice in 1 week after hearing there was a private investor staying in the East Wing. A friend of a friend brought pastries and spent most of the visit talking about how difficult it was to meet real people of substance. Another guest offered motivational advice so loudly and repeatedly that Adrian could barely get a word in, then casually asked whether Aiden Cross had any interest in boutique retail ventures. Whenever Adrian spoke modestly or suggested he lived simply, interest cooled. Whenever the rumor surfaced that he might control an independent investment trust, enthusiasm returned. The pattern was so obvious it would have been funny if it hadn't been sad. But the most painful discovery wasn't greed. It was indifference. Some people looked right past him, not cruelly, not loudly, just casually, as if a man who moved more slowly, spoke more softly, and no longer commanded a room simply faded into the wallpaper. Adrian began noticing small things, how often people interrupted him, how rarely they waited for him to finish a sentence, how service workers were spoken to only when necessary. How many polished smiles disappeared the instant they believed no opportunity remained. By the end of the first week, Adrian had learned more about human behavior in silence than he had learned in 5 years of boardrooms. And then, one Tuesday morning, Elena arrived. Elena Marquez was 27 years old, newly hired through the estate management agency after the previous housemaid left to care for her mother in another state. She was not dramatic. She was not flashy. She did not enter the story with swelling music and perfect timing. She entered carrying fresh towels, a small notebook, and the calm focus of someone who had learned early in life that responsibility was not something you announced, it was something you practiced. Elena came from a modest family. Her father had been a school groundskeeper. Her older sister was a nurse. Elena had studied hospitality management at a community college, but financial pressure had pushed her into work before she finished. She took pride in doing things well, even when nobody noticed. Especially when nobody noticed. On her first day in the East Wing, she knocked gently on Adrian's door. "Mr. Cross?" "Housekeeping." Adrian looked up from a book. "Come in." She stepped inside, set the fresh linens down, and gave him a respectful smile. Not overdone, not pitying, just warm. "I'm Elena. I'll be helping cover this side of the house for the next few weeks. If there's a routine you prefer, please tell me so I don't disturb you." Adrian blinked. That was it. No awkward pause, no exaggerated sympathy, no curious stare at the wheelchair, just professional courtesy. "I appreciate that," he said. "I usually read in the morning." She nodded and pulled out her notebook. "Morning quiet." Got it. He couldn't help smiling. "You write everything down?" "Yes," she smiled back. People feel respected when they don't have to repeat themselves. The line hit him harder than it should have. He watched her straighten the room with quiet efficiency, humming softly under her breath. Before leaving, she adjusted the curtains so the sun wouldn't land directly in his eyes. She did it without comment, without asking for praise, without even checking whether he had noticed. For the first time in weeks, Adrian sat still after someone left his room and didn't feel studied. He felt seen. Over the following days, Elena became a steady presence in the East Wing. If Adrian dropped a pen, she picked it up naturally, not theatrically. If tea was too cold, she simply replaced it. If the garden path outside the East Room looked crowded during deliveries, she quietly suggested a better hour for fresh air. She never hovered. She never spoke to him like he was fragile, and she never acted impressed by money. One afternoon, she found him staring out at the garden. "Beautiful day," she said. "It is. You should go outside." Adrian gave a dry laugh. Very direct. Elena leaned lightly on the doorframe. "Fresh air helps almost everything. You sound very certain." "My father used to say the sun can't solve every problem," she replied, "but it can stop some problems from sounding bigger than they are." Adrian looked at her. That's a good line. He had many. She smiled. "Would you like me to wheel you out?" He hesitated. It had become strange how much he dreaded being seen in motion, even though it was part of the plan. But there was no performance in Elena's face, no curiosity, no discomfort, just a simple offer. "Yes," he said. She took him to the garden. The mansion's roses were in bloom. The fountain whispered softly. Somewhere beyond the hedges, groundskeepers were trimming the lavender beds. For 10 peaceful minutes, neither of them spoke. Then Elena said, "This may be rude. That's an interesting way to begin." She laughed. "You don't seem like someone who enjoys being taken care of." Adrian looked ahead. "Is it that obvious?" "A little." "And what do I seem like?" "Someone used to solving his own problems." That answer followed him long after she returned inside. Because she was right, and because she saw it without needing to know his name. As the days went on, small conversations turned into a rhythm. Elena talked about practical things, how she wanted to finish her studies one day, how her sister worked long shifts, how her father still gave everybody advice whether they asked for it or not. Adrian, as Aiden, spoke more than he expected to. He talked about architecture without revealing too much, about how spaces affect emotion, about how lonely it is when every room you enter is designed to impress instead of comfort. Elena listened well, not the fake kind of listening where people wait for their turn to speak. Real listening, the kind that makes you hear your own thoughts more clearly. One evening, she brought him dinner earlier than usual. "You changed the schedule," Adrian said. "You had a headache at this hour yesterday." He stared at her. "You remembered that?" She placed the tray down. "I told you. I write things down." He almost said, "You're the first person here who acts like my discomfort matters." Instead, he said, "Thank you." Elena paused. "You say thank you a lot. Is that a bad thing?" "No," she said gently. "It just sounds like you're not used to people doing simple things for you without keeping score." Adrian was quiet. Elena's face softened. "Sorry, I didn't mean to overstep." "You didn't." He looked at the tray. then at her, then finally said what no one in his world ever made safe to say. Maybe I'm still learning what kindness looks like. Her expression changed not into pity, but understanding. That's okay, she said. A lot of people are. Adrian's test had started as an experiment. By the third week, it had become a mirror. And he did not always like what he saw in himself. He had expected others to fail. He had not expected to confront his own habits. He noticed how often he assumed motives too quickly, how guarded he had become, how easily he associated beauty and charm with manipulation because he had been disappointed before. He began to wonder if he had spent so many years being evaluated for his money that he had started evaluating everyone else for their intentions before giving them a chance to simply be human. Elena challenged that instinct without ever trying to. One afternoon, Adrian overheard two staff members talking in the service corridor. "He seems nice," one whispered, likely referring to him. "Maybe," the other said. "But the quiet ones are hard to read." Elena passed them carrying folded sheets and said calmly, "Maybe he's quiet because people don't make quiet people feel welcome enough to talk." She kept walking. She had no idea Adrian heard her. But he did. And something in him shifted again. A few days later, a guest named Vanessa arrived for lunch with one of Adrian's business associates. Vanessa was elegant, confident, and very aware of the impression she made. By coincidence, or perhaps not, she asked to see the gardens near the east wing. Adrian was outside with a book when she approached. "Oh," she said, brightening. "You must be Mr. Cross. I've heard about you. Only good things, I hope." She laughed. "Only mysterious things." For the next 20 minutes, Vanessa spoke in polished circles about wellness retreats, private equity, and how people with real vision were so rare these days. When Adrian gave brief, non-committal replies, she increased the charm. When he mentioned that he spent most of his time reading and preferred a simple life, her enthusiasm flickered. Then she casually asked, "Do you invest personally, or do you let your office handle most of it?" Adrian almost smiled at the predictability. Before he could answer, Elena appeared with iced tea. "Mr. Cross, your tea." Vanessa stepped back, slightly annoyed by the interruption. Elena set the glass down, then looked at Adrian. "You skipped water at lunch." Vanessa raised a brow. "You keep close track." Elena answered politely, "It's my job to notice what people need." The sentence landed harder than Vanessa realized. Not what people own, not what they can give, what they need. Vanessa soon excused herself. After she left, Adrian looked up at Elena. "Do you always rescue people that quietly?" Elena frowned. "Rescue? You arrived at exactly the right moment." She glanced in the direction Vanessa had gone. "I didn't rescue you. I brought tea." He chuckled. "Fair enough." But later that evening, Adrian wrote one line in a leather notebook he had begun keeping since the test started. The difference between performance and care is that performance wants to be noticed. Care notices you. That same week, Elena's sister Rosa came to pick her up after a late shift. Rosa waited in the staff parking area, but Elena had forgotten her phone inside. Adrian happened to be in the side library when Elena rushed in. "I'm so sorry," she said, flustered. "My sister is outside and I can't find my phone." "It's on the shelf," he said. She grabbed it, relieved. "Thank you." Then she hesitated. "Would you mind waiting here for 2 minutes? I left your evening file by the chair, but I'll be right back." Adrian almost laughed at the idea of waiting in his own library. But he nodded. A moment later, he wheeled toward the open window and heard voices outside. Rosa said, "You talk about him differently." Elena replied, "Who?" "Mr. Cross." There was a brief pause. "He seems lonely." Elena said quietly. Not helpless, just lonely. Rosa's voice softened. Be careful with your heart. Elena let out a small breath. I'm not imagining things. I just think some people carry more pain than they show. And some rich men know how to look wounded when they want sympathy. Elena answered immediately. That's not fair. So you like him? Elena was silent long enough to say everything. Finally, she said, I respect him. Rosa laughed softly. That sounds more serious. Adrian leaned back from the window, stunned by the strange warmth rising in his chest. Respect, not fascination, not ambition, not convenience. Respect for a man she believed had nothing to offer except conversation and a difficult life. The next morning, Adrian was distracted enough that Martin noticed immediately. You look like a man who's either found hope or made a very expensive mistake. Adrian smiled despite himself. What if I've found someone good? Martin leaned back in his chair. Then the question becomes whether she knows the real you. Adrian's smile faded. That was the problem. The lie had started as a shield. Now it stood between him and the one person he didn't want to deceive. Tell her, Martin said. It's not that simple. It rarely is. Adrian rubbed his forehead. What if she never forgives me? Martin's voice was gentle. Then perhaps this entire plan will have taught you the cost of testing hearts while hiding your own. That line stayed with him all day. For the first time, Adrian wanted the experiment to end. But fear kept him still. Not fear of losing admiration, fear of losing Elena. A storm rolled in that Friday evening, not dangerous, just steady rain and gray skies that turned the mansion quiet. Deliveries were delayed, half the staff had left, and Elena remained longer than usual finishing inventory in the East Wing. Adrian found her in the pantry, struggling to reach a box on a high shelf. You could have asked for help, he said. She glanced back and smiled. And missed the chance to prove I'm stubborn? I see. A matter of principle. Exactly, he wheeled closer and pointed. Try the sidestep stool. She found it and reached the box. There, teamwork, Adrian watched her laugh and felt the decision arrive with a clarity he could no longer ignore. Elena, she turned. I need to tell you something. Her expression changed immediately. Are you okay? No, he said honestly. And yes, I should have said this sooner. She set the box down slowly. You're making me nervous. You should be, he said with a pained smile, because what I'm about to tell you may make you angry. She waited. Adrian took a breath that felt like stepping off a cliff. My name isn't Aiden Cross. Elena stared at him. My name is Adrian Vale. Silence, rain against the windows. A clock ticking somewhere in the hall. She gave a short, confused laugh. That's not funny. I'm not joking. Her face went still. No, yes, she stepped back. No, Adrian Vale owns this estate. I know. You said you were a private guest. I was hiding. Hiding from what? He met her eyes. From people who only care about what I can give them. The hurt on her face came fast and clean. So you lied to everyone. A small group knew. That does not help. He nodded. You're right. She crossed her arms tightly. Were you testing me? Adrian answered with the only honesty he had left. At first, I was testing everyone. Her eyes filled not with dramatic tears, but with the sharp sting of disappointment. That's worse. I know. No, I don't think you do. Her voice trembled, not loudly, but enough to break him. Do you understand how humiliating this feels? I told you things about my family. I trusted you. I defended you. And all that time you were deciding whether people were sincere enough for you. Adrian looked down. I never meant to make you feel small. She swallowed hard. You didn't make me feel small because you were in a wheelchair. You made me feel small because you were in control of the truth while everyone else was not. He had no defense, none that mattered. The rain seemed louder now. Finally, he said, "You deserve better than an explanation. You deserve an apology. I'm sorry." Elena looked at him for a long moment, then said quietly, "I need to go home." He nodded. Of course. She left the pantry without another word. And for the first time since this whole plan had begun, Adrian felt truly ashamed. Not because the test was exposed, but because honesty had come to him too late. Elena did not come to the East Wing the next day, or the day after. Adrian told himself she deserved space. But space, he discovered, can feel a lot like loss. He walked more during those days than he had in weeks, no longer using the wheelchair in private. The symbol of his experiment now felt heavier than anything he had ever lifted. He saw the mansion differently. Its grand halls no longer looked elegant. They looked empty. Martin visited Sunday afternoon and found Adrian in the library, standing by the window. "She knows." Adrian gave a humorless smile. "I assume my face answered before I did." Martin came to stand beside him. And I hurt the one person I didn't want to hurt." Martin nodded, not unkindly. "Then don't rush your own comfort. Let the lesson do its work." Adrian looked out at the garden. "How do I fix it?" "You may not be able to fix it on command," Martin said, "but you can become worthy of forgiveness." On Monday morning, Adrian made several decisions. He canceled 3 non-essential social events. He restructured staff interaction policies across all household properties so that service employees had stronger reporting access, better schedules, and direct respect protocols from management. He funded a scholarship program in his mother's name for hospitality workers completing delayed education. And he did all of it quietly, without attaching his face to any announcement. Not to impress Elena, not to win her back, but because the weeks in the East Wing had shown him how many decent people carried entire systems on their shoulders without recognition. He had built hotels. Now he wanted to build fairness. A week later, Elena returned, not to see him, to work. Professional, composed, distant, she greeted him with "Good morning, Mr. Vale." The formal use of his real name hurt more than anger would have. "Good morning, Elena." He didn't push. He didn't corner her into conversations. He thanked her when appropriate, gave her space, and accepted the quiet. Slowly, over the next 2 weeks, the silence softened. One afternoon, Adrian found Elena in the garden trimming dead leaves from a rose bush during her break. "I was told that's not in your job description." She kept working. "It bothers me when people ignore what could bloom again." The line was so very Elena that Adrian almost smiled. "May I sit?" She glanced at the bench beside her and nodded. He sat. For a minute, neither spoke. Then Elena said, "My sister thinks I should quit." Adrian swallowed. "I would understand. She thinks staying means I've gone soft. And have you?" Elena looked at the rose bush. "No, I think staying means I want to decide for myself who a person is after they fail." Adrian let out a quiet breath. "That's more mercy than I earned." "Probably," she said. He nodded. "Fair." At last she turned toward him. "Why were you really doing it?" He answered carefully. "Because I had reached a point where every compliment sounded purchased. Every invitation sounded strategic. Every smile made me wonder what it wanted back. I told myself I was searching for truth. But I was also hiding from vulnerability. It's easier to observe people than to be honest about how much you need them." Elena listened. "I didn't pretend because I thought needing support was shameful," he continued. "I pretended because I thought being powerful all the time was the only way not to be hurt. And I was wrong. Her expression softened, just slightly. That, she said, is the first thing you've said that sounds like freedom. He looked at her. Do you think I can become someone better than the man who made that choice? Elena set the garden shears down. Yes, the answer came so simply that it stunned him. But only if you stop trying to control how people see you, she added. And start being willing to be known. Known, not admired, not protected. Known. From that day on, their relationship began again, not quickly, not dramatically, but carefully. This time with truth. Adrian showed Elena parts of the estate no guest ever saw. His mother's old reading room, the unfinished design studio where he still sketched ideas, the stack of letters from employees whose children had earned degrees through company assistance. Elena showed him the world he had overlooked. The break room where staff exchanged lunch recipes, the bus stop where night workers waited in the cold, the budgeting notebook she used to stretch every paycheck wisely, the worn hospitality textbook she still kept by her bed because she planned to finish what she started. They talked like equals because, finally, they were. One evening, Adrian asked, "Why didn't you hate me?" Elena smiled faintly. "I was angry. You had every right. I know." She looked down at her tea, then back up. But anger is easy when you reduce people to one bad decision. Harder when you've also seen their better parts. Adrian was quiet. She continued, "You were wrong. Deeply wrong. But you also listened. You noticed things most people with money never bother to notice. And after I found out the truth, you didn't try to buy forgiveness. You changed." He felt something tighten in his throat. "I'm still changing," he said. "Good," Elena replied. "That means you're alive." Months passed. The East Wing no longer held a secret. It held dinners with long conversations, shared jokes, and the kind of peace Adrian had spent years pretending he did not need. He helped Elena enroll in evening classes, but only after she agreed, and only through the scholarship fund open to all employees. She made him visit his own hotels without announcement, so he could observe how managers treated frontline staff when no cameras were present. He started spending weekends at community design workshops his mother once supported. She reminded him to rest. He reminded her to dream bigger than survival. Their affection grew not through grand displays, but through consistency. Trust, Adrian learned, is built in ordinary moments, in kept promises, in remembered details, in apologies that become action. One winter evening, Adrian invited Elena to the old conservatory behind the mansion. It had been restored recently, filled with warm lights and white orchids. She stepped inside and looked around. "This is beautiful." "My mother loved this room," Adrian said. "She used to say plants and people have something in common." Elena smiled. "What's that?" They both lean toward light when they're given a chance. She looked at him then, really looked at him. And something quiet and certain passed between them. Adrian reached into his pocket, not hurriedly, not theatrically, just steadily. "Elena, before I met you, I thought love was something people claimed when life was convenient. You taught me it's something built when truth becomes more important than image, when respect becomes deeper than charm, and when kindness asks for nothing in return." Her eyes shone. "You saw me when I was hiding. Then you challenged me to stop hiding. You helped me become a man I can respect. And if you'll let me, I want to spend the rest of my life giving that same honesty, steadiness, and care back to you." He opened the box. A simple ring. Elegant, timeless. "Will you marry me?" Elena covered her mouth, laughing through tears of joy. "Yes," she whispered. Then stronger. Yes. Their wedding was held 6 months later in the garden behind the East Wing, not at one of Adrian's luxury properties, not under a magazine deal, not as a social event. Just family, close friends, staff who had become extended family. Martin in the front row pretending not to be emotional, Rosa openly emotional and not pretending at all, and sunlight pouring over white flowers and green hedges. Elena walked down the aisle with quiet grace. Adrian stood waiting, not as a man performing perfection, but as a man grateful to be fully known. Their vows were simple, no dramatic promises, just truth. To honor each other, to listen first, to protect peace in their home, to choose kindness, especially when life grew difficult, to remember that love is not proven by gifts, but by how faithfully you show up. After the ceremony, Martin raised a glass of sparkling cider and said to the bride, whose character could not be impressed by wealth, and to the groom, who finally learned that sincerity is the only fortune that lasts. Everyone laughed. Adrian looked at Elena. Elena looked back, and for once in his life, there was no test left to run. Only a life to live honestly. Years later, people still told the story wrong. They said a billionaire married a housemaid. They said a rich man found true love in disguise. They said a lonely tycoon tested women and discovered the value of humility. But that was not the real story. The real story was this. A man who had everything learned that success without trust is only polished loneliness. A woman with no interest in status showed him that respect is more healing than sympathy, and kindness is more powerful than charm. And together, they built a marriage not on image, wealth, or convenience, but on truth. Because real love does not rush toward luxury. It moves steadily toward character. It listens. It forgives wisely. It tells the truth. And in the end, it proves something the world often forgets. Money can open doors. But only sincerity can make a house feel like home. So if life ever gives you the choice between being impressive and being genuine, choose genuine. Because the people who truly belong in your life are not the ones who love what you have. They are the ones who care for who you are. And that kind of love, you can't buy it. You earn it with honesty, kindness, and the courage to finally be seen.